She was laughing with him when I dropped her coat, nodded him with him. That soft, shoulder-tipping laugh she used to reserve for when I did something clumsy and charming. Now it was his. And the worst part, she didn't even notice me. He leaned closer, whispering something behind the edge of his champagne flute, and she responded with that breathy, "Oh my God, stop," followed by a hand on his wrist. I was maybe 10 feet away, standing there like the decorative plant next to the candle. The ball had just started, lights still warming up, people still arriving, and already I was witnessing the opening scene of something I wasn't invited to. I didn't say anything, not then. I just stooped, picked up the coat she'd tossed on me like I was staff, and watched her flirt with a man whose name I still don't know. They were in the middle of the entrance hall, right under the golden archway. Guests walked around them. Waiters passed by, but it was like they existed in some velvet bubble, and I was pressing my nose against the glass. No one saw me, not even her. I walked up slowly, not sure what I'd say, not sure if I wanted to scream or just disappear. My shoes squeaked loud and ridiculous, and still she didn't flinch. When I reached them, I cleared my throat. She turned. No guilt, no panic, just surprise. "Oh, hey," she said, like she'd forgotten I was real. The guy smiled at me like I was some coworker interrupting a lunch meeting. "Everything okay?" she asked. Not "you look upset," not "I'm sorry," just "everything okay?" I looked at her, at him, at the space between them that felt more intimate than our bedroom had in months. And then I said something that would change everything. I looked straight at him and said, "You can have her. But you should know she's allergic to lies, compliments, and accountability." The smile dropped from both of them. She hissed my name, but I'd already walked past them, past the guests, past the coat check, out through the wide glass doors into the cold, where I finally exhaled the breath I'd been holding for 1.5 years. Because the truth is, the moment she forgot I was standing there, she reminded me of everything I'd been refusing to see. And this story, it doesn't start with heartbreak. It starts with the moment I decided I was done begging to be seen. By the time I reached the car, my hands were shaking. Not because of the cold, that Ohio spring cold that still tries to pretend it's February, but because my body had finally caught up with what my heart already knew. I sat behind the wheel, not starting the engine, just staring at the reflection of the ballroom entrance in the side mirror. My wife was still inside, laughing, crying, apologizing. Who knows? I didn't check. I didn't care. That night, I didn't go home. I didn't go to a bar either. Not because I didn't want to, but because I knew I'd end up drunk texting her some pathetic line like, "Why did you do this to me?" And I refused to give her that power. Instead, I drove to the only place that still felt like mine, the back lot of my old high school, where the football field lights were off and the silence didn't require explanation. I slept in the car, jacket over my chest, phone on silent. When I woke up, the first thing I did was open our shared cloud storage. I don't even remember why. Maybe part of me hoped to see photos from the ball, a breadcrumb of her pretending to still love me. What I found instead was a folder. It was called Receipts, receipt ... Inside were screenshots, dozens of them. Some from text threads I didn't recognize, others from a private email I hadn't seen before. Hers, but not hers. Not the one we used for Amazon orders or Netflix. This one was slick, secret, filled with things no spouse should ever have to read. There were messages between her and Arlo. I knew it had to be him stretching back 6 months. Him. That dress tonight. I'm not sure I'll survive. Her. Then you better behave. My husband's catching on him. Let him catch. He'll never know what to do with what he finds. Her. You're terrible. You love it. Her. God help me, I do. There were others. Late-night exchanges. Photos. One of them in a hotel robe. Another of her hand wearing the watch I gave her for our 5th anniversary resting on his bare shoulder. And the worst part? She saved them. She kept them all labeled, sorted, even time-stamped. Like trophies. Like proof. I scrolled and scrolled until my vision blurred, until my thumb ached from swiping, until my throat closed from trying not to scream. Why save these? Was she planning to use them? Brag about them? Or was this her way of remembering the only moments she actually felt alive? By the time I looked up, it was morning. The sun was lighting up the old football bleachers, and I was still parked like a loser with nowhere to go and a marriage that had quietly died months ago. Only I had missed the funeral. I drove home, not to see her, not to talk, but to change my clothes and pick up waffles from the neighbors. When I opened the front door, the house smelled like her perfume, the one I used to love. The one I once said reminded me of summer mornings and apple skin. Now it just smelled like betrayal. And there she was, standing in the kitchen like nothing happened, hair tied up, coffee in her hand. That robe. "You didn't come home," she said, like I'd broken curfew. I nodded. "H my coat." Then I asked one question. "Did you delete the folder?" Her eyes flickered. "Just once. I don't know what you're talking about." And that was the moment I knew. She was going to lie until the end. But what she didn't know was that I already had backups, 3 of them, cloud synced, 1 on a flash drive. I dropped in the bottom of the coffee canister the week before, and 1 more printed. This wasn't going to be a confrontation. This was going to be a strategy, because she flirted with him at the entrance ball, and I walked up, yes, but now I was done walking. I was preparing to run and burn the ground behind me. I didn't yell, I didn't cry, I didn't accuse. What I did instead was stand in front of our open pantry, scoop 2 tablespoons of coffee into the machine and press brew, all while she scrolled through her phone like she hadn't just detonated our entire marriage behind my back. I watched her fingers move, calm, rhythmic, perfectly polished, nails tapping through whatever fantasy world she was still living in, probably texting Marbell or Arlo or one of the other corporate snakes from Valorium who still thought integrity was just a company buzzword. She didn't say a word. So I poured my coffee, sat down, and stared straight into the grain of our oak dining table, tracing the little groove where she'd once carved a heart into it with a fork. It was still there, faint but present, like a cruel reminder of a version of her that might have existed once. After a few sips, I got up, walked into the bedroom, and opened the drawer under her vanity mirror. Inside was her makeup bag, a silk scarf she hadn't worn in months, and a black envelope I'd placed there earlier that morning. It didn't have a name on it. Didn't need one. She'd find it eventually. I left it right under her favorite lipstick. Inside the envelope were 2 things: a printed copy of the cloud screenshots, every message, every photo, even the flirty ones with emojis, and a single post-it note with just 3 words. I saw everything. That's it. No threat, no confrontation, no ultimatum. Just a mirror held up so she could finally see the rock behind her reflection. I wasn't planning on being there when she found it, but fate, as it turns out, has an unholy sense of timing. I just returned from walking waffles when I heard her scream, not the kind of scream that asks for help, the kind that realizes help was never coming, the kind that knows she got caught. When I stepped inside, the envelope was on the floor, half crumpled. The papers scattered like a murder scene of memories she couldn't bury fast enough. She stood there barefoot in our bedroom, hair tangled, eyes bloodshot. "Where did you get these?" she snapped. I looked at her like she'd asked me what planet we were on. "They were on your cloud drive," I replied. "You left the folder unlocked." Labeled it with an emoji, for God's sake. "You invaded my privacy." I almost laughed. Almost. Instead, I walked past her. Calm, slow. My body felt like it was moving underwater. "You invited a man into our marriage, lied to my face, laughed with him in front of me, and now you want to talk about privacy." She followed me down the hall like she had something else to say, something rehearsed. But the look on her face wasn't guilt. It wasn't sorrow. It was fear. Not fear of me. Fear of losing control. Because for the first time in years, she realized she wasn't running the script anymore. I grabbed my laptop bag and keys. "I'm not leaving forever." I told her just enough to clear my head. "Don't call, don't follow, and whatever you do, don't try to play innocent. You lost that right when you giggled like a schoolgirl while I stood 3 feet away." And just before I walked out, I stopped at the doorframe. "You think this is the end?" "It's not," I said, voice steady. "This is the start of me without you." Then I walked out. I didn't know where I was going. I didn't know how long I'd be gone, but I knew one thing. Whatever came next, I wasn't going to be the man she pitied. I wasn't going to be the man she brushed off with half-lies and apologetic kisses that meant nothing. She started a war with smiles and secrets. I was going to finish it with silence and truth. It took me 3 days to come back, not because I forgave her, not because I missed her, but because I needed to look her in the eye when I finally said the words that had been strangling me in silence. "I know who you are now, and I can know it." But before I said anything, I planned one more move. See, when I left the house with just my laptop bag and keys, I wasn't entirely honest. I hadn't gone to a motel or crashed at a friend's or even slept in my car again. I went to my cousin Noah's place, the one person in my family who'd always seen through Serafina. He used to call her polished chaos. I thought it was jealousy. Now I think he was clairvoyant. Noah's wife, Jules, is a tech forensic specialist. Not the movie kind. No black vans or hacking into satellites. But she can trace metadata and scrub digital timelines like it's a Sudoku puzzle. I showed her the screenshots. I didn't ask her to go digging. She just raised her eyebrows and said, "Give me the iPad." Serafina had forgotten to log out of her side account on the shared device. Within 2 hours, Jules had access to emails that confirmed hotel bookings, ride shares, even restaurant reservations billed to a card she thought I'd never see. But one email stood out. A reservation for this Friday night. 2 people, 8 p.m., at Mori Rano's. That wasn't just any restaurant. It was our place. The place we used to go once a year on our anniversary. The place where I proposed to her in a rainstorm after the waitress spilled red wine on her white dress. And she just laughed, like nothing could ruin us. She was taking him there. So, I made a choice. I went back home Friday afternoon like nothing happened. She was in the kitchen pretending to slice lemons like we were hosting a summer party. The envelope was gone. Her face was neutral, calm like the surface of a pond that's already swallowed the body. "You look better," she said, not looking up. "Yeah," I replied. "Got some clarity." We made small talk. She asked if I was hungry. I said no. She said she had plans later with some of the women from her office. I just nodded. At 7:45, she walked out in a black dress I hadn't seen in months. Something inside me winced. Not because she looked beautiful, she did, but because I remembered the first time I saw her in that dress. It was at my promotion party, the night she told me she was proud of me, the night I believed every word she said. Now she wore it for him. And then she left. At 7:58, I parked 2 blocks away from Morarano's across from the bakery where I used to pick up cannoli on weekends. I waited 10 minutes and then I walked. Not fast, not angry, just steady. I walked into the restaurant. It was warm inside, jazz in the background, wine glasses clinking, tables full of people who still believed in each other. And there in the back corner booth was Serafina and Arlo. She didn't see me at first. His hand was on her wrist. Her lips were forming that "your bad" smile I used to think was only mine. Then she looked up and her face changed. I didn't stop walking. I went straight to the matrai. "I'm sorry," I said, calm and polite. "I need a moment with the couple in the corner booth." He hesitated. I slipped him at 20. When I got to their table, Serafina was already sliding out of the booth, eyes wide, voice just above a whisper. "Hank, what are you?" I raised a hand, not to threaten, just to stop her from digging her own grave. Then I turned to Arlo. "You've been eating off my plate for a while now," I said. "Figured you should finally pick up the check." He blinked. I placed a white envelope on the table, one nearly identical to the one I'd left under her lipstick. This one had screenshots printed on thicker paper. Then I looked at both of them. "You two deserve each other. Really. I mean that. You're both shallow, secretive, and so desperate to feel special that you stepped on the one person who never lied to either of you." Serafina said my name again, but it didn't sound like my name anymore. It sounded like a request, like a defense, like a plea. I walked out. I didn't look back. Outside, the air was thick with spring humidity. Cars passed, people laughed, and I kept walking. Because that night, the truth wasn't just something I knew. It was something I handed over. And for once, it was them who had to decide what to do with it. 3 days passed after Morano's. 3 long, quiet, bizarre days where nothing happened on the surface, but everything was quietly unraveling beneath it. Serafina didn't come home that night. Not that I expected her to, but the funny thing is, I thought I'd feel satisfaction, maybe even power. I didn't. I just felt hollow, like I'd taken a wrecking ball to my own life and was now sitting in the rubble holding a flashlight. I stayed at the house, not for her, for Waffles, for the photos on the walls that still showed smiles I now didn't trust, for the stupid habit of making coffee at 6:17 a.m. because I couldn't stand starting the day on a round number. And then, on the 4th day, my phone rang. Unknown number. Normally I'd let it go to voicemail, but I picked up without thinking. "Mr. Heapler," a voice said. It was male, mid-50s, firm, but not aggressive. "Speaking," I replied cautiously. "This is Wallace Breen, managing partner at Valorium at Chase. I believe you're Serafina's husband." I felt the temperature in the room change. "Yes, I'm calling. Well, I intended to call her. Actually, this was still listed on her emergency file. Apologies. I didn't mean to involve you in anything professional, but now that I have you, maybe it's fate." I didn't speak, just let the silence stretch, waiting. "I've worked with your wife for almost 6 years, he continued. "Smart woman, brilliant even. But she's been distracted lately. And after recent client feedback, some comments made during off-hours events, I've had to start asking uncomfortable questions." I didn't interrupt. "I don't want to violate her privacy," he added. "But I feel like you already know something is going on." I let out the smallest breath. "She took a client to Morano's on Friday night," I said. He paused. "That restaurant was not authorized for expense," he admitted quietly. "And the client, Arlo Benson?" "Yes, that's what I feared." "We received a complaint this morning from another partner who was dining there. Said she witnessed something inappropriate and unprofessional." There was another pause. "I'm not calling to get involved in your marriage," he said, "but if there's anything I should know, Anything that might explain the decline in performance or the questions from legal. Now would be the time. I didn't give him details. No revenge, no salacious monologue. I just said you're right not to trust her version of things. He exhaled sharply. Thank you. When I hung up, I stared at my phone for a while. I wasn't sure if what I had done was vindictive or necessary. Maybe both. Maybe neither. But for the first time in weeks, I felt like I wasn't the only one carrying the weight of her choices. By that evening, her name was removed from the company directory. She didn't come home that night either. But something else did. A package delivered in a brown padded envelope addressed to me with no return label. Inside was a single USB drive. No note, no explanation, just the drive. I didn't plug it in right away. Something about it felt like a trap, like a scab I wasn't ready to rip off. But eventually, curiosity broke through my caution. I booted up my old laptop, the one that had no internet connection, the one I used to store backup files for my freelance contracts, and slid it in. There were 5 video files, each marked with a date, each no longer than 2 minutes. Security footage. Hotel hallway cameras. I watched them one by one. Serafina, Arlo, same floor. Same rooms, different nights. One showed them laughing as they waited for the elevator. Another showed him entering her room at 11:08 p.m. None were explicit, just context, just confirmation. It wasn't the affair that hit me hardest. It was the look on her face in the footage. Casual, carefree, like she was doing something as ordinary as brushing her teeth or sending an email. No hesitation, no fear, as if lying to me was routine, as if I never mattered. I still don't know who sent it. Maybe her boss. Maybe one of her colleagues trying to cover themselves. Maybe Arlo's wife, assuming he had one. But it didn't matter. What mattered was this. She wasn't just reckless. She was comfortable in the betrayal, and comfort only comes from habit. So I backed up the files, locked them in a safe folder, and sat in the dark for hours, feeling the pieces of myself I used to like slipping away. I wasn't sad anymore. I was something worse. Empty. And the scariest part, that emptiness was starting to feel normal. It was a Tuesday. Cold, quiet. The kind of day that doesn't really register until something happens to mark it. And Serafina came back home like nothing had cracked open between us. I heard her key in the door around 8:45 p.m. She stepped in slowly, like she wasn't sure what version of me she'd find on the other side. The lights were dim. The house smelled like microwave soup and dog shampoo. I'd bathed Waffles that afternoon, more for distraction than hygiene. He perked up when the door creaked open, but didn't run to greet her. Neither did I. She hovered by the entryway in her coat, holding her handbag like a shield. Her face was drawn but polished, hairbrushed, lips slightly tinted like she'd rehearsed this return in front of a mirror, perfecting the expression somewhere between guilt and innocence. "Hey," she said, barely above a whisper. I was seated on the couch, laptop closed, Waffles curled next to me like he sensed the tension would escalate. I didn't speak. I just looked at her. Not the way I used to, not like she was mine. I looked at her like she was someone I used to know, but couldn't quite place anymore. She stepped in further, setting the bag on the counter. Her heels echoed unnaturally loud in the quiet house. "I didn't know if I should come back," she said. "I didn't know if you'd want me to." Still, I said nothing because everything I had once wanted no longer seemed to matter. I was past the wanting. I had entered the watching phase where you no longer hope someone explains because you already understand too much. "Okay," she exhaled, setting her jaw. "I guess you're not talking." Finally, I spoke slowly, deliberately. Talking would imply you deserve a conversation. She flinched just slightly, then nodded, accepting the first hit. I'm not going to deny what happened, she said, arms crossed. But you ambushed me in public. You humiliated me. I didn't deserve that. That was the moment something snapped in me, but not loudly. Not like glass shattering, like ice cracking beneath your boots when you realize you've wandered too far from the shore. You're still so good at that, I said, making your betrayal about your feelings. She opened her mouth, then closed it again. You flirted with him right in front of me. I continued like I didn't exist. Then you lied, hid, stored every memory like a trophy. And now that someone finally called you out, you're not ashamed. You're offended. She shook her head. You don't understand. No, Serafina, I do understand. That's the problem. Her eyes glassed over. Then, whether from shame, fear, or something less noble, I couldn't tell. But for the first time in this entire mess, she looked small, not powerful, not put together, just cornered. She walked slowly toward the couch and stood across from me. I messed up, she said, voice breaking slightly. I know that. I don't expect you to forgive me overnight. But I didn't plan for this to happen. I tilted my head. You created a private email account, rented hotel rooms, booked dinners under aliases. You planned this better than our honeymoon. Silence. Then, do you want a divorce? I looked her dead in the eyes. Number. Her breath caught, surprise flickering like a candle struggling to stay lit. I want the truth first, I said, all of it. No edits, no convenient omissions. The real timeline. When it started, how deep it went. What you were planning when you smiled at me across that dinner table last month and said you were just tired from work. She sank onto the ottoman across from me. Slowly, carefully, I'll tell you, she said. But can I ask one thing first? I didn't answer. She looked at me, eyes pleading. Is there still a version of this story where you stay? I blinked. Then I said something that didn't sound like me. Not the me she married, anyway. That depends on how much of that story is fiction. And then I stood up and left the room. Not slamming doors, not throwing punches, just letting her sit there alone. Finally forced to rehearse a monologue for an audience that had stopped applauding. I didn't sleep that night. I stayed in the guest room, not out of some moral high ground, but because I couldn't stand the scent of her on our pillows. That faint trail of amber and musk used to calm me, ground me, made me feel like she was my home. Now it smelled like a mask she wore to kiss someone else. I sat in bed half upright, lamp on, notebook open. Not a journal, just loose thoughts. Scattered, ugly, repetitive. I kept writing one sentence over and over. How did I not see it? At 2:12 a.m., the door creaked open. I didn't look up. She didn't speak right away either. I heard her breathing soft, uneven, like she'd been crying or rehearsing. Maybe both. I didn't think you'd still be awake, she said eventually. I'm not asleep until this version of you stops existing, I answered without turning. She stepped in anyway, closing the door behind her like we were about to discuss the weather. I still didn't look at her. My pen hovered over the page still. I owe you the truth, she whispered. No, I corrected. You owe me the truth without manipulating it. I finally looked up. She looked like hell, hair tangled, sweatshirt thrown over her nightgown. Mascara ghosted under her eyes. But it wasn't her appearance that got me. It was the look, the vacant kind, of someone who had already convinced herself she was beyond redemption. She sat down on the edge of the bed far enough to keep distance, close enough that I could smell the hint of wine on her breath. I lied about when it started, she began. It wasn't 6 months ago. It was 10 inches. I didn't blink. It wasn't just Arlo. He was later. The second that word broke something in me I didn't know was still intact. My stomach clenched, my jaw locked. Still, I didn't speak. The first was a man named Darren from a strategy summit in Chicago. She continued, "It was after our fight, the one about you turning down the DC job. I told myself I needed distance, but really, I needed control." Now I looked at her. "So you slept with him to punish me?" "No," she said immediately, then winced. "I slept with him because I thought he saw me, because I felt powerful again, because for one moment I wasn't your wife. I was just wanted. You were wanted. I snapped by the man who paid for your mother's hospital bills, who took a second job while you went back to school, who sat with you in silence when your sister relapsed instead of telling you to cut her off." She broke right then. A sough exploded from her chest and she doubled over like the weight of her own choices had finally caught up to her bones. "I know," she choked. "I know. And I hate that I did this. I hate that I let myself become someone I swore I'd never be." I sat still, numb, hollowed out. Then she said something that made the entire room tilt sideways. I stopped it. A month ago, cold turkey, deleted the burner email, blocked him. I was going to tell you, I just didn't know how. And then you showed up at the restaurant and I realized I waited too long. "You think stopping matters?" I asked, voice trembling. "You think regret rewrites 10 months of lies?" She looked up, her eyes pleading. "I don't expect it to. I just didn't want you to find out like that. That like a husband watching his wife get flirted with wasn't enough humiliation. I want to fix this," she said softly. I laughed a sound that felt foreign in my throat. "You think there's a fix?" She didn't reply. "I want to fix it too," I added. She looked hopeful, a flicker, but I crushed it in the next breath. "I want to fix me because you broke something that doesn't belong to you anymore." She wiped her face, tried to say something, then stopped herself. I watched her stand, defeated, and crossed the room to leave. At the door she turned and said one last thing. "I still love you." I shook my head. "Then why do I only believe you when you lie?" She closed the door behind her, and for the first time since this all started, I started to cry. Not for her, not for the marriage, but for the man I used to be before she hollowed him out for attention. But tomorrow I'd wake up and start becoming someone else. Someone who didn't ask to be loved in pieces. 2 weeks. That's how long it's been since she said, "I still love you." 2 weeks of tension humming between walls that used to echo with laughter. 2 weeks of whispered apologies, overcooked dinners, and silence that clung to everything like smoke. But also 2 weeks of clarity, because something shifted that night in the guest room. Something I couldn't name right away. It wasn't closure. It wasn't rage. It was peace. I think fragile, new, untested peace. The kind that comes not when something is fixed, but when you finally let go of trying to fix it. She asked me gently if I considered therapy. Not as a couple, just for me. I said I already started, and I had. The week after Morano's, I walked into a small practice down the street and poured my story out to a woman named Lorraine, who wore cardigans that smelled like chamomile and looked at me like I was more than just the wreckage of a man someone stopped loving properly. And then, last night happened. I came home after a long walk with Waffles, who now follows me like a shadow, like he knows something about loyalty even we humans don't, and found a letter on the dining table. Not a text, not an email, an actual handwritten letter. It was from her. 10 pages, neat cursive, no justifications, no finger pointing, Just a brutal inventory of her choices, of how she'd become someone she didn't recognize, and how somewhere along the way, she'd stopped seeing me as a person and started treating me like a fixture in her life, permanent and unbreakable. She ended the letter with this: I don't expect you to forgive me. I just want you to remember who you were before I bent your world into my reflection. I hope you find him again, and I hope you let him live louder than I ever allowed. And for the first time in this entire painful journey, I realized I wasn't angry anymore. Sad, yes. Changed, absolutely. But free. This morning, I made us both coffee, set hers down across from mine. No words, no promises. Just two mugs between two people who'd finally stopped pretending to be something they weren't. She looked at me, waiting. I said, I'm not staying, but I'm not leaving bitter. She nodded, eyes shining, but no tears. I want you to be okay, she said. I will be, I replied, and you will too. We talked calmly, like two people parting ways at a train station. Not a battlefield, no blame, no venom. Just gratitude for what we'd once had and acceptance that it wasn't enough anymore. I moved out the next day, not in anger and choice. Rented a tiny one-bedroom near the lake. Started jogging again. Let Waffles sleep at the foot of the bed without guilt. I even pulled out my old guitar, the one I hadn't touched since before we were married. And tonight, for the first time in months, I played, not for anyone, not to forget, but because music reminded me that I was still here, still me. So no, we didn't reconcile. We didn't rebuild the castle, but we did walk away without burning it down. And in a world full of bitter endings, that's the closest thing to a happy one I could have hoped for.